Welcome to our Friday, everybody. It is Penny and Kim, and we are lighting up your Friday once again with the 5 stars of strengthening families. We're continuing to talk about knowledge of parenting and child development. And in particular today, we're going to ask the question about what is the difference between discipline and punishment. But before we do that, we're going to check in on our challenge from last week. So over to you, Penny.
Thanks, Kim. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us again this week. So last week we talked about male role models and the importance of having a male role model in children's lives. We invited you to have a look at your own situation and whether you had one already, to notice the dynamic there, if you noticed any particular benefits. If you don't have a male role model in your children's lives, if you would be interested in maybe reaching out to a friend or a family member, or even just trying some of the ways that males interact with children. And rough and tumble play is a good example. Maybe you want to see if maybe you're already really good at that. Maybe you already play in a way that creates resilience and increases risk taking and those things we talked about. So we just wanted you to have a look and notice what's going on there.
Maybe it's a teacher, maybe it's a coach, those kind of things. There's lots of ways that there are people in our communities that we can connect with to be a role model for our children.
Yeah, exactly. Good point. So as Kim mentioned, today we're going to talk about the difference between discipline and punishment. So today is our last in the 4 series on knowledge component. And we thought this was a really good one to end on because discipline, punishment, consequences are kind of all used synonymously, and there's some really big differences. So this really fits well into the knowledge of parenting, because this is a really critical differentiation to make in regards to how you deal with behaviors you would like to see less of. So I'm going to ask Kim to talk a little bit about what that question brings up for her. Kim, what does that bring up for you when you talk about the differences there?
The very first thing that it makes me think of is the words themselves. So punishment, the root word is punish. Discipline, the true meaning of that, I'm sure many of us have heard this, is to teach. So there's a really big difference between the two. So to teach is really what we want to do for our children. We want to learn our children to learn wrong from right, how to behave in the situation, how to treat each other, all of those things, and they can all be taught as well. So that is in my mind what discipline means to me. And there's a difference in how they feel, I think, too, as a parent, and how they feel when you're doling out punishment or doling out discipline. Even just saying it, there's a difference in how that feels. And certainly I think for the child, there's a difference in how that feels as well. So that's what comes to mind for me. How about you?
Well, I know when we were discussing this earlier, I couldn't think of what that quote was, and this isn't an exact quote, but discipline teaches a child how to solve a problem. Punishment punishes them for having a problem. So you said it beautifully when you talk about sort of the intrinsic or inner motivation to do what's right. We want our children to be able to make those decisions in their life about doing what's right because it's right, not because someone else is watching. So punishment tends to take that away from children. It brings the focus to the punisher. So, I mean, there's many, many different topics I could go on about related to this for hours. But to me, the crux of it is whether you call it a consequence whether you call it a punishment, whether you call it discipline. Relationship needs to lead. And research shows that when we shame and use guilt and we use physical discipline, the results are more aggression, less self-control actually, and that they just don't work in the long term, right? We want our children to develop inner mechanisms for self-control, and they don't. They're constantly then, you know, there's a tendency to take things underground and lying and or becoming afraid, and there's just so many consequences to punishment that. And I think a lot of the misconception is when, you know, we say, you know, punishment isn't good, people think permissive. So that's not what we're saying. We're not saying that there's no rules on behavior or limits on behavior, or we're simply saying we don't want our children to feel bad because they've made a poor choice. Or we want to understand that maybe they don't have the capacity to make that choice. We talk about capacity all the time. If your child doesn't have the skill or the ability that you're asking from them, and then you punish them, or again, it's hard for me to be succinct about this because there's so many different areas that, but I do think this is the pivotal point, is an awareness between the difference between discipline. Like you said, you want to teach them how to solve their problems. You want to teach them how to think independently. You want to teach them how to control themselves. And they need to practice.
I think as well, I think if the child is expecting there to be some sort of a harsh, whether it's punishment or discipline or corrective behavior, if it's too harsh, the child will then, like you said, not believe that the relationship can take the weight, and so then they feel that they may feel that they need to lie about it or hide it, and it's not so that they can be deceptive. And I mean, I suppose it's so they don't get into trouble, but I think even if you go deeper, it's so that the relationship isn't severed. Like, I don't know that you will still care about me if you knew that I did this. Mm-hmm. So for me, the bottom line is the relationship, it conveys that the relationship cannot take this weight. So therefore I need to lie about it, or, you know, like you say, take it underground. That's what I keep thinking of in when there's too harsh of punishment or even discipline, right? Because what are we teaching?
And that's another great point, right? If one of the key components we know about positive parenting is the power of modeling, then exactly that too, right? What are you teaching your children? Might is right, that I'm bigger and stronger than you and I can make you do what I say. Those kinds of concepts that you might not believe or say to your children. However, punitive discipline or punishment conveys that message. So for me, it's helpful to always sort of think about, how do I, again, balance limiting behavior and maintaining relationship, maintaining the alpha role. How do you positively go about setting limits? And it doesn't have to be unpleasant to be a consequence. I think that's the other really big misconception, is that if it doesn't hurt them or make them cry or make them feel bad, it's not a consequence. So changing the narrative might help. So instead of my child's bad and misbehaving, okay, so what do they need? Are they missing a skill? Are they under some kind of stress? Am I triggered? There's all kinds of ways that you can look at misbehavior from a different lens. And what you look for is what you're going to find. So that's my 2 cents or $50 more like it on discipline and punishment. Please don't misunderstand us that we were telling you to be permissive. And again, there's so many good resources about and good research about physical punishment in particular and shame, and about how those can affect your children through their entire lives. Yeah.
So what is our challenge today, Penny?
So this week, we want you to look at. So first of all, again, awareness, examine. What are your thoughts about that? So when we say to you, what's the difference? What comes to mind? What do you think punishment is, and what do you think discipline is? Do you feel like you're already doing those things? And for the most part, parents aren't always one way or another, right? There's often components of discipline mixed in with, or maybe you notice that, oh, well, I kind of thought that was all the same. And maybe there's areas you want to explore a little bit. Maybe you want to gain some knowledge. Again, our website, www.fcss.ca, great resources for positive parenting classes, where a family's support worker will help you and support you through a parenting plan where you can figure out what you're going to do, and you can learn how to apply both natural and logical consequences to situations to maintain relationship and still limit behaviors. So yeah, little steps, what you can manage. Yeah, so that's what Kim and I are going to invite you to try this week.
Awesome. And great weekend on top of all of that.
So as I said earlier, this concludes our 4-session series on knowledge. The next series will focus on communication with respect to the social and emotional competence of children. So that's exciting. So we will get started with that next week, Friday at 1. So as Kim said, have a great weekend, everyone, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.